And Colleen had sent me a very short email just before we finished the option of her book, and it was very simple. It said, have you ever thought about acting in the movie? Maybe Ryle. I could see it. And I think it was her belief in me that gave me the ability to dream and have the confidence to possibly pursue it.
Just once?
Just once.
Everyone tends to want to talk about why this is such an important film and why it's so empowering, and I think that that is really important. But I think what's beautiful about this film is there is every color of human emotion in it.
Would show up on a set, I knew that they just wanted me to show up and look cute and stand on a little pink sticker where I'm supposed to go and say what I'm supposed to say, but I also knew that that wasn't fulfilling for me, that I wanted to be a part of the storytelling, that I wanted to be a part of the narrative, whether that be in the writing, in the costume design, in creating the character. And sometimes I had directors or producers or writers who would welcome that and invite that once they saw that I was able to offer that. And sometimes I would have people who really resented that because they were like, we just hired you to be an actor. Yet when I went in the meetings, I would just seem like I'm just there to be the actor and ready to get the gig. I wouldn't reveal that I actually need to have authorship in order to feel fulfilled. So I think that for them, sometimes that might have felt like a rug pull because you're like, you're trying to assert yourself into something that we didn't hire you to do.
If you compartmentalize this character of Ryle as an example, and you remove the abuse. So let's just remove that for a second. So I want to talk about the character outside of the abuse. Because what he does in the movie is unforgivable. And there's no excuse. And no amount of I'm sorry's will ever undo it or fix it. He blew up his life. And he deserved to lose his family.
Honestly, the work that I did on screen was easier than the work that I did off screen in this movie because of all that went into it. So I really look at I love a challenge though, and I'm just so proud of every bit of it. We went through a whole roller coaster of the human experience, and I'm very proud.
When Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds sashayed into Saturday Night Live's 50th anniversary extravaganza, you'd have thought they were there to pick up an award for World's Most Unbothered Couple. Seriously, imagine a room filled with comedic legends, starstruck fans, and a giant 50th birthday cake for SNL, all overshadowed by one humongous question. What are Blake and Ryan doing here? Everyone knew about the messy lawsuit fiasco that had catapulted the pair into headlines, so the sight of them beaming under Studio 8H's bright lights made for a scene so awkward you could practically hear that record scratch moment in everyone's heads. Some joked that if the tensions got any thicker, you could spread them on toast. Others scrambled for their phones, eager to capture every second of this unexpected cameo. After all, even the best comedy sketches can't beat the real-life drama of two mega celebrities strolling into a place where half the audience was still uncertain if they were friend or foe. Speculation started swirling before the cameras even panned over to them. Ryan Reynolds, the perpetual wisecracker, kicked off the fun with a line so casual it felt rehearsed. "Everything's amazing. Why, what have you heard?" He delivered it with that trademark smirk of his, the one that usually charms the pants off any crowd. Except this time, the laughter sounded just a smidge uneasy. Blake Lively, radiant in a designer outfit that screamed, "Look, I'm stress-free," seemed equally determined to project a vibe of total calm. Given that she'd spent the past few months insisting she was practically cowering in her home. Thanks to a certain monstrous legal war, you can forgive the audience for thinking, wait, aren't you supposed to be, miserable right now? The couple's entrance, which probably would have been a highlight at any other event, quickly transformed into comedic gold for those who love a good Hollywood paradox. The reason everyone's jaws hit the floor was simple: the lawsuit swirling. Around Lively, and Justin Baldoni was the talk of the town. She had thrown some heavy accusations his way, painting him as the grand villain in a twisted behind-the-scenes saga. He responded by filing a giant countersuit. Some said it was as hefty as the entire budget of an Avengers movie, and insisted that Lively was orchestrating a PR smear campaign to ruin his career. The stakes were sky high, the tension was borderline ridiculous, and the entire industry was quietly placing bets on which side would crash first. For Lively to show up at SNL, smiling from ear to ear like she was just out for a fun date night, felt like the comedic version of pouring a bucket of confetti on a 4-alarm fire. Critics, gossip columnists, and probably even the stage crew were left scratching their heads, whispering, Did she forget about the countless statements describing her fragile emotional state? Once the initial shock subsided, the real comedic spectacle began unfolding in pockets of the after-party. Industry elites, still reeling from their surprise, allegedly whispered about how bizarre it was to see Lively so, well, undistressed. One insider claimed you could almost see the question marks dancing around people's heads as they tried to reconcile her lively, pun intended, behavior with her previously tearful proclamations. Meanwhile, Ryan made it his personal mission to crack a few jokes, presumably to keep the mood light. Some speculated he was trying to flip the narrative, show the world that they're still beloved, still on top of their game, and definitely not cowering at home in fear of depositions and cross-examinations. Hey, laughter might not solve a lawsuit, but it sure makes it a lot more entertaining for spectators. Then came the swirl of talk show analysts and YouTube commentators, all of whom dissected the cameo to the point you'd think they were analyzing the Zapruder film. Some argued that, hey, maybe laughter was just their coping mechanism. Others insisted this was the height of hypocrisy, a sign that Blake's emotional distress storyline might not be entirely authentic. To be fair, it's hard to look weepy and helpless when you're on live television, cracking jokes with comedic legends and snapping selfies with fans. Justin Baldoni's lawyers, likely perched in front of their TVs with popcorn, probably couldn't believe their luck. Within hours, legal experts went online to confirm that yes, such footage could absolutely be used as evidence. If you're claiming that you're so traumatized you can't face public life, it's maybe not the best look to show up on one of the biggest comedy stages in the world, all smiles and sparkles. But let's rewind to how we got here in the first place. Because no comedic meltdown is complete without a messy origin story. The entire fiasco started with It Ends With Us, a film adaptation that was supposed to catapult a beloved novel onto the silver screen. Fans had been excited until rumors leaked that the casting process resembled a clown car with mismatched performers. Word on the grapevine said Blake was convinced she knew how to shape the project better than any mere director, which included rewriting entire scenes on the fly. Then came the dreaded interview clip where Blake smirked about how she loved taking full creative control, even if it meant overruling directors. That might have gone unnoticed if not for the fact that Justin Baldoni, said director, was stuck in the middle of those rewrites. Suddenly, everyone was side-eyeing Lively, wondering if her hands-on approach might have become an arm-twisting approach behind the scenes. Next thing you know, the whole fiasco took a dark turn when Lively alleged that Baldoni's behavior toward her on set was far from professional. She described instances that left her feeling disrespected and objectified, a serious claim that made headlines overnight. But Baldoni fired back with a classic hold my drink move. He leaked reams of text messages, behind-the-scenes footage, and voicemails to show that he might be the gentlest soul on the planet, or at least a guy who was too nice to even step on a spider. So began a ping-pong match of revelations, each side lobbing new evidence as if they were in a game show titled, Who Wants to Tank Their Opponent's Career? Public opinion was already swaying like a pendulum when the infamous SNL cameo dropped. At first, Lively had tons of supporters who saw her as a potential victim calling out powerful men in Hollywood, especially with #MeToo still echoing through the industry. Yet Baldoni's raw footage featured him looking more like an overstressed teddy bear than a menacing figure. Suddenly, Lively's narrative didn't seem so cut and dry. By the time the couple took their seats in that crowded studio, half of social media was Team Lively, while the other half was Team Baldoni, and a vocal minority was Team Just Give Us the Popcorn and Keep Fighting. A big part of the comedic irony lies in the contrast between Lively's I'm deeply traumatized please and her high-spirited presence under the stage lights. If she truly was a bundle of nerves, she sure faked the opposite convincingly. Add in Ryan with his quick one-liners, and you've got a scenario that might have made for a perfect SNL sketch if it weren't all happening in real life. Observers reported that a few cast members, uncertain how to engage, delivered half-hearted greetings before stepping aside to let the couple mingle with other unsuspecting attendees. The scuttlebutt was that the couple stayed for about an hour. After the broadcast ended, hobnobbing with various celebrities, presumably trying to prove they were still beloved darlings of Hollywood. Some people smiled politely, others pretended to be engrossed in their phones to avoid being roped into an awkward conversation about lawsuits. But it wasn't just random celebrities who were puzzled by the couple's presence. Even fans who'd once idolized them found the cameo jarring. After all, Lively had said repeatedly that her life was basically in tatters, trolls on social media, humiliating tabloid coverage, fear for her own well-being. Then, with one high-wattage grin on national TV, she apparently forgot all that. This dissonance gave birth to about 100 conspiracy theories. Maybe she was forcing herself to keep up appearances. Maybe she was demonstrating that she wouldn't let fear control her life. Maybe she was just so used to being in the spotlight that staying home was more stressful than stepping out. Regardless, the jokes and memes poured in, with some quipping that if severe emotional distress looked this good, then sign them up. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni was rumored to be on a family getaway in Hawaii. Just picture him, lays around his neck, sipping a tropical drink, and occasionally checking the news on his phone, reading about how Lively and Reynolds were apparently having the time of their lives on SNL. His attorney, Brian Fredman, went on record suggesting that Baldoni wasn't so much on vacation as he was in a mental health regrouping period. Understandably, the mental drain of a massive lawsuit with sexual harassment allegations might prompt anyone to find solace near sandy beaches and gentle waves. If that were the whole story, maybe the public would have shrugged and moved on. But the stark contrast, the comedic cameo for one party, the emotional retreat for the other, painted Lively and Reynolds as the ones who were somehow out of touch with the gravity of the situation. And let's talk about the comedic meltdown known as public perception. Typically, when a celebrity claims they're in emotional ruins, they might avoid large gatherings, skip red carpets, or pop out wearing oversized hoodies and big sunglasses to avoid detection. Lively did the polar opposite. That SNL cameo was like writing a giant letter to the world that read, "I'm so fine. I'll even crack jokes about it." If you wrote this in a script for a movie, critics would call it too on the nose. Yet here we were, watching real-life out-parody an actual comedy show. Baldoni's supporters wasted no time pointing out the potential hypocrisy, and soon #Blakegate, or #Reynolds Reckoning started trending on social media, depending on which corner of the internet you inhabited. The comedic angle extended beyond just SNL. Colleen Hoover, the author of the very novel being adapted, apparently had enough of the drama and quietly distanced herself from Lively online. Feminist groups who initially might have rallied behind an actress claiming misconduct were now doing some serious side-eye. The reason? Lively's carefree routine just didn't line up with what one might expect from someone in the throes of genuine psychological torment. The resulting vacuum of sympathy from old allies grew larger every day. In an entertainment world that loves to devour controversies and champion underdogs, the optics of that SNL escapade practically shoved Lively off the victim stage and onto the "what are you up to" stage. Reynolds, typically lauded for his comedic genius and philanthropic gestures, was caught in the crossfire. Fans who had adored his silly tweets about parenting and aviation gin found themselves bewildered that he would so lightly jest about a matter that, according to legal documents, was painfully serious. The fiasco also underscored how drastically the Hollywood power dynamic is shifting. In the old days, a single big-name celebrity could shape the narrative through carefully curated interviews and well-placed tabloids. But now, an army of podcasters and YouTubers stands ready to dismantle any PR storyline that seems fishy. Baldoni's leaked footage circulated across these channels, each commentator pausing frames to highlight the discrepancy between Lively's allegations and Baldoni's apparently gentle demeanor. The comedic effect of these analyses was borderline theatrical. People inserted humorous voiceovers and silly on-screen text like "terrifying predator?" Hard to see it. In a world where viral content can overshadow traditional headlines, Lively and Reynolds faced a digital wave of skeptics who weren't buying into the mainstream narrative. As the comedic meltdown continued, SNL 50th became a legendary event, though not for the reasons the show's producers intended. People started saying the real joke of the night wasn't any of the sketches, but the cameo by the star couple locked in a Hollywood fiasco. The comedic irony was so thick you could hear fans simultaneously laughing and gasping. The biggest punchline? The notion that the environment you'd think they'd avoid, an enormous public gathering filled with gossip-hungry celebrities, was the exact place they chose to show up. Ryan's comedic track record suggested he might have recognized the inherent silliness of that scenario. Maybe that was the entire point. Deflect serious accusations with a grin and a wisecrack. But it didn't seem to land as intended, and the laughter in the room came laced with disbelief. And if the cameo itself wasn't enough comedic fodder, the aftermath proved unstoppable. Late-night host poked fun, joking that Lively and Reynolds had invented a new type of therapy, laughed the lawsuit away. Memes flooded social media, depicting a cartoonish Lively skipping through a field of flowers labeled emotional distress, while Reynolds performed stand-up in the background. The couple's polished PR attempts to justify the cameo felt half-baked to many, especially when they tried to spin it as a show of courage. People asked, courage against what exactly? The chance that someone might ask them about the lawsuit in the green room? Meanwhile, new leaks kept dropping from Baldoni's corner, making the plot even juicier. Snippets of behind the scenes. Voice messages revealed him sounding anxious and timid, not exactly the profile of a threatening figure. One message had him apologizing for a delayed email reply because he was swamped and exhausted. Another showed him politely asking if any changes to the script needed to be discussed as a team. Each leak was more comedic in its contradiction to the monstrous image Lively had initially implied. The fiasco reached the point where it almost felt like an over-the-top soap opera. People half expected a twist in which Baldoni revealed he was actually an undercover saint. The comedic meltdown also extended to the couple's interactions with other A-listers. Headlines popped up about certain Hollywood friends dropping them on social media or carefully editing them out of group photos as if they'd turned radioactive. A rumor even circulated that at the SNL after-party, a few big-name actors literally pivoted and walked the other way when they spotted Lively and Reynolds heading over. Talk about a comedic scene. Imagine the great social migration happening in real time, with celebs rushing to top off their drinks just to avoid small talk about lawsuits. Rumor or not, it painted a vivid picture of how precarious the couple's standing had become. Then came the disclaimers from Lively's camp that she's allowed to enjoy a night out despite her emotional burdens. And sure, that's true, but in an industry fueled by perception, the sight of her giggling on stage, while a legal fight about harassment and defamation raged on left, many feeling that the comedic gap between her words and actions was the size of the Grand Canyon. Even supporters had to admit that the optics were not ideal. They might have tried to spin it as strength or resilience, but it played out more like confusion and mixed messaging to the broader public. All the while, Baldoni remained in Hawaii, presumably collecting seashells and building elaborate sandcastles with his kids, which only served to amplify the comedic incongruity. You had a man trying to find peace in an idyllic setting, while the supposed victim was out cracking jokes at one of the world's most watched anniversary specials. If someone wrote this scenario into a romantic comedy, you'd expect an epic third act twist where everything is revealed to be a big misunderstanding. But this was real life, with real reputations at stake. That leads us to the ultimate comedic question. How do you bounce back from an SNL cameo that turned into comedic fodder for the entire entertainment world? If Lively and Reynolds hoped this, cameo would be a triumphant reaffirmation of their star power. They were met with an unintended barrage of memes, talk show jabs, and endless speculation about their sincerity. Meanwhile, Baldoni scored an unintentional PR coup. Without so much as lifting a finger, beyond releasing those pesky little behind-the-scenes clips, he watched his opponents apparently undermine their own credibility. In classic Hollywood style, everyone's now looking ahead to the big day in court, rumored to be just around the corner. Will Lively continue to claim extreme emotional distress, or will her SNL cameo undercut those statements so thoroughly that she has to scramble for a new angle? Will Ryan's comedic quips haunt him if lawyers dissect them frame by frame, highlighting every grin and sly comment that suggests they're not exactly rattled by the ordeal? Or will the couple have another cunning plot twist up their sleeves, like a heartfelt public apology or a tear-jerking interview that re-centers them as the real victims? No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain. This comedic meltdown has set a precedent for how not to handle a lawsuit that hinges on mental anguish. The entire fiasco has proven that in the world of celebrity PR, timing is everything. And apparently, so is comedic context. Show up at a big event at the wrong time, and you might as well invite the world to roast you. For fans, it's been the wildest emotional roller coaster, with each new twist more entertaining than the last. For the couple, it might be a cautionary tale. If your lawsuit claims revolve around your inability to function in normal society, maybe don't pick SNL's biggest anniversary to prove just how camera-ready you still are. In the end, the story is far from over. Rumors swirl about new testimonies, potentially scandalous emails, and more of Baldoni's footage that could pop up online at any moment. Meanwhile, Lively and Reynolds might think twice before making another public appearance. Their comedic meltdown has, ironically, become the storyline overshadowing everything else, including the actual merits of the lawsuit itself. As fans and foes alike grab their popcorn to watch how this saga unfolds, one lingering question remains. Can the couple laugh their way out of a crisis that just keeps getting funnier and more problematic by the day? No one knows the punchline yet, but it's guaranteed to be a doozy. Hollywood's comedic meltdown machine rarely disappoints, and this particular fiasco seems to have legs for days. So while the rest of us watch clips of them smiling for the cameras at SNL, the real comedic meltdown rages behind closed doors, fueled by legal documents, endless speculation, and the unstoppable hunger of an audience that just can't look away from a collision of star power, scandal, and an oddly timed comedic cameo. If this is how they handle a crisis, heaven help us if they ever decide to do a full-on late-night monologue about it. The only question is whether the laughter will eventually turn into collective groans, or if the pair will pull off a triumphant comedic high note that somehow salvages it all. In Tinseltown, anything can happen, and that's exactly why we can't stop watching.